You ever notice how gamers can spot one familiar mechanic and instantly act like they solved the whole game? Meanwhile, Zero Company got hit with that exact lazy diagnosis. The second people saw turn-based combat and a Star Wars skin, suddenly somebody in the crowd shouted, "Oh wow, Star Wars XCOM," like they had just cracked a national security code. Naturally, the internet clapped for the speed of that take instead of the quality, because modern game discourse is not a contest of thought anymore. Instead, it feels like a drag race, where the winner is whoever farts out the fastest half-baked comparison. Apparently, seeing one recognizable ingredient now counts as full nutritional analysis. Nothing screams fake insight louder than reducing a whole game to the first thing your brain coughed up. Right away, Zero Company became the latest victim of that bad habit. From there, people stopped paying attention to the actual details, because smug shorthand is easier than thinking. Officially, the game is still being sold as a single-player, turn-based tactics game. Beyond that core, the developers are also talking about third-person exploration between combat sections, base downtime, squad relationships, customization, and galaxy map decisions. At heart, the tactics are still the main course. Around them, the extra systems seem designed to make players care before the pain starts. Under that setup, the whole point looks pretty obvious: give the player emotional context, so the losses actually sting. Compared to the lazy just Star Wars XCOM take, that sounds a lot more interesting. Unlike the meme version of the conversation, the real version has nuance. Rather than killing the genre, those added elements might finally help more people connect with it. Across the internet, though, genre purists are reacting like somebody poisoned their childhood. Inside their heads, apparently, a tactics game can only be pure if the characters never feel alive outside a hit percentage. Some players hear base interactions and start breathing into a paper bag. Others hear third-person exploration and behave like the developers replace combat with yoga retreats. Several more hear relationships and immediately assume the game has become a dating simulator with blasters. Nobody in that panic seems interested in what was actually said. Instead of reading the details, they sprint straight to the worst possible interpretation and build a camp there. By this point, the whole routine feels embarrassingly familiar. Every new game now gets flattened into a shortcut before it even has a chance to explain itself. Once that label sticks, thousands of people repeat it, because familiarity sounds smart when delivered with enough confidence. Through all that noise, the obvious truth gets buried. Zero Company still sounds like a tactics game first. To regular people, turn-based tactics is a terrible sales pitch. For most casual players, that phrase sounds less like fun and more like a tax form with grenades. Say grids, percentages, cover, and permadeath out loud, and half the room will mentally leave the building. Mention those same systems to strategy fans, however, and suddenly they are nodding like priests at a sermon. Funny enough, the wider audience will still dump 80 hours into some bloated, icon-clearing simulator if the menu glows and the trailer whispers, "Become legend." That disconnect is exactly why BitReactor's approach makes sense. Keep the tactics, keep the consequences, and keep the disasters that make the genre memorable. Then, add enough context that the average viewer does not feel like they are signing up for spreadsheet warfare. Better yet, let the squad feel like people before the bullets start flying. Afterward, every mistake hurts more, because now it has a face attached to it. Recent reporting says the third-person exploration happens between combat sections. Notably, that means the feature is not replacing the tactics. Crucially, it also does not mean the game is secretly an action shooter, wearing a fake mustache. What it does mean is that missions might get some build-up before the grid appears. Picture walking through a damaged area, hearing squad chatter, and feeling tension rise before the first turn begins. Compared with the usual, good luck idiot, mission start, that sounds like an upgrade. In many tactics games, combat begins the instant the board shows up, and the atmosphere arrives later, if at all. Here, the pressure can start earlier. Through that structure, a fight may land harder, because the player had time to soak in the space first. During those moments, setup becomes part of the gameplay, instead of filler stapled onto it. Caring is the whole trick with tactics games. Without emotional investment, all you really have is expensive Sudoku with lasers. Permadeath matters because consequences matter. Failure matters because regret matters. One missed shot can ruin a mission, but the real sting comes from losing somebody you actually gave a damn about. That is the magic of the genre when it works. Not perfection or flawless planning. Real tactics starts when the original plan explodes and the recovery attempt somehow becomes the story. Best of all, players remember the disasters, not the tidy victories. Nobody tells war stories about the mission where everything behaved. People remember the sniper who whiffed a 92% shot and doomed the left flank. Fans remember the loudmouth squadmate who should have been benched but somehow saved the run. Veterans remember the custom-built gremlin they protected for 10 hours, and then accidentally marched into a death trap. Those moments stick because they feel personal. Mass Effect gets brought up for a reason here. Obviously, some weirdos hear that comparison and instantly assume romance options are about to crash into the tactics layer. Elsewhere, another group hears it and starts mourning the death of strategy because somebody mentioned dialogue. Neither reaction is intelligent. What that comparison really points to is team chemistry, friction, downtime, and personality. Very few strategy games make you truly know your units instead of merely using them. A soldier with good stats is useful. By contrast, an insufferable idiot with a mouth, history, and 10 hours of shared disasters becomes memorable. That difference is massive. Resource management creates efficiency, but personality creates attachment. Once attachment kicks in, losses stop being abstract. Now a death has fingerprints. No longer is it generic Republic beard number 5, turning into vapor off-screen. Suddenly, it is your hand-built disaster goblin getting erased, because you mistook confidence for competence. Thanks to customization, bonds, and downtime, those casualties can hit way harder. Mechanics become memories the second the game gives them blood in the veins. Still, there is a real risk worth talking about. Pacing is the danger, not too much story. Whenever a studio starts saying it wants a broader audience, alarm bells should ring for a completely different reason. Sometimes that phrase means the team found smarter ways to ease players into the genre. Other times it means the developers got nervous and started stuffing the game with distractions whenever the mechanics had to carry weight. Players can smell that cowardice instantly. Slow walk sections, padded corridors, dead air dialogue scenes, and fake cinematic fluff all reek of insecurity. Nothing kills momentum faster than a game acting embarrassed by its own gameplay. Should Zero Company fall into that trap, criticism would be deserved. A tactics game should never apologize for being what it is. Right now, though, the outrage is way ahead of the evidence. Could the pacing drag? Sure. Might the writing fall flat? Absolutely. Will former XCOM talent automatically guarantee greatness? Not even close. Even so, the project at least appears to understand what actually makes this genre work. Recovery is more important than flawless planning. Adaptation matters more than control. When everything goes sideways, tactics finally becomes interesting. After the flank collapses, the sniper disgraces the family line, and half the squad is out of position. That is when the real story starts. Somehow clawing back a win through panic, menus, and one miracle turn is the whole appeal. Meanwhile, the gatekeeping around this game is unbelievably pathetic. For years, strategy fans have complained that the genre never gets real budgets, mainstream attention, or proper presentation. Then, a studio tries to give a tactics game stronger character context and broader appeal, and suddenly, those same people start shrieking sellout. Watching that contradiction in real time is like seeing a man beg for rain and then scream at the clouds. Deep down, some of these people do not want the genre to grow at all. They want it trapped in a jar, where it can keep functioning as a fake IQ badge. Let normal players enter the room, and the private club mystique starts to vanish. Once that happens, inconvenience can no longer pretend to be personality. So naturally, a game that might bridge tactical depth with emotional accessibility terrifies them. Nothing threatens a gatekeeper faster than a locked door getting opened. Here is the blunt version. Zero Company is not interesting because it might beat XCOM. That framing is for children and sports radio callers who need every discussion to sound like a boxing poster. The actual question is whether the game can widen the lane without flattening what made it worth entering. If third-person exploration builds tension, good. If customization makes casualties personal, good. None of that weakens tactics unless the developers lose their nerve. Everything depends on whether the core stays sharp. Maybe the game faceplants. Perhaps the pacing drags like a corpse through mud. Conceivably, the writing lands with all the force of wet cardboard. At least the thing seems to be trying something with pulse in a market full of sequels, live service sludge, and committee-built mush. Compared with the lazy discourse circling around it, that alone gives it more life than most. Lazy people online keep missing one very simple truth. Tactics hit harder when you care who is standing in the blast radius. Just Star Wars XCOM is not inside. That line is only the social reward of sounding familiar without doing any actual thinking. And honestly, that routine is getting really damn old.